Okay, welcome to lecture number 5. This is the final lecture in this course. In this section, we're going to be talking about 3 ways to establish credit. So let's say you're in college, or maybe a junior in college, or just graduating college, and you're like, man, I want to start establishing credit. Here are 3 ways to get this done. So usually you must be 18 to open up a credit card or any kind of loan. So keep that in mind. Usually that's the rule in most cases. So if you're 15 and you're like, man, I want to get a credit card, it probably is not going to work. Okay, so method number 1, become an authorized user on a family member's credit card. And so the way this works is, let's say my mom has a credit card. She's been responsible with it. It has a low balance. She pays back her monthly payments on time. My mom could go to her bank and say, I want to add my son Femi onto my account as an authorized user. And so what happens is the bank gives me a credit card directly tied to my mom's account. And so now her payment history and that account is going to be opened up on my credit history. And so every time there's an on-time payment for that account, it reports positively for my mom and for me. But also, if there's a negative payment remark on that account, let's say my mom is late for her payment or the balance gets too high, that is also going to report on her credit report and credit history and mine as well. And so becoming an authorized user, it can be beneficial as long as both parties agree to maintain a small balance and pay back every payment on time. But it also can be negative, if mom decides I'm going to just go shopping, and she racks up a high balance and she's late on some payments. Now that negative history is going to report for her and me as well. The second method to establish credit is to find a cosigner with good established credit who is willing to cosign a loan with you. So let's say I go to the bank, I apply for a loan, the bank comes back and says, Femi, you don't have any history, paying back any liabilities. There's no credit history. Your credit score is about 620, which is not too bad, but you don't have any history with credit. We're willing to give you this loan if you can find a cosigner. And so a cosigner is basically someone that comes onto the loan with you. And so I can go to my mom or my dad and just say, hey, I'm trying to get a car loan. They won't extend any credit to me, but they will as long as you can come on and be a cosigner on the loan. And so having a cosigner can be beneficial to help you, open up an account and start building credit. And as long as you pay back your liabilities each month on time, this is going to build your credit. But keep in mind that a cosigner, or the person that cosigns for you, this account is going to show up on their credit report as well. And so if my mom cosigns for my car loan, now the car loan is going to show up on my credit history and her credit history. And so if the payments are late and delinquent, that's going to impact my mom's credit history as well. And so it's a risk to the cosigner to cosign. But if you have an agreement, if you have someone you trust and there's an agreement like, hey, make sure that you pay back the amount on time, then it can be very beneficial to start building credit. The third and final way that I want to talk about to establish credit is to apply for a secured bank credit card. Okay, so let's say you're young, you're ready to start establishing credit. You can go to your local bank and you can tell them, I'm interested in establishing or building credit using a secured bank credit card. And so the way this works is you usually make a small deposit to the bank, usually about $200 to $500. And the amount that you deposit becomes the credit limit on the credit card. So if I go to the bank and say, I want to open up a secured bank credit card, I want my deposit to be $300. The bank will say, okay, here's a credit card with a $300 credit limit. And so if you fail to make your payments on time, the bank is going to tap into that deposited amount to pull funds to make the payment of which you owe. But keep in mind, if you miss a payment, there's also late fees attached and fees to the bank. And so if the minimum payment is $25 and you miss that, now you owe the bank potentially $25 plus a $35 late fee. And so the bank is going to go into the deposited amount and pull out, $55 or $60 to bring the account current. And the amount that you deposited is gone. You don't get that back. And so this is a good way if you are good with money and you have a good solid system where you're like, I'm going to use the credit card for small things that I can pay back each month. This will be very beneficial because every time that you make an on-time payment, your credit score goes up. But in this scenario, if you do not make an on-time payment, you lose your deposit, you have negative reporting to your credit, and your credit score is going to go down. And so this is definitely a good method that you can look into when it comes to establishing credit. Okay, you've reached the end of our course for today. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's lesson. I really hope that you've learned something new. Let's go ahead and do a quick course recap. So at the beginning, we talked about credit, which is your financial power that allows you to purchase high dollar amount items if you don't have large amounts of cash available. And so usually when we talk about credit, we're talking about your history and your ability to go to the bank and borrow money to purchase things that are usually cost a lot of money, such as a house or a car. Your credit history and your credit financial power is summarized on what's called a credit report. A credit report shows the history of all open liabilities and loans tied to your name, and it shows the payment activity associated with each account. So for any credit card, any student loan, any home loan you have, it's going to show up on your credit report, and the payment history associated with those accounts is also going to show up on your credit report. We talked about credit score, which is also known as your FICO score. This usually ranges between 350 and 850, and it quickly tells lenders about your financial history and credit profile. So if the bank pulls your credit report and they see a credit score of 500, they're going to consider you a risky borrower, and most likely they will not extend any kind of loan to you. If they see your credit score is about 700, 720, then they're more likely to want to work with you to extend any kind of loan for a car, house, or even a credit card. And lastly, we talked about some different ways that you can build credit. We talked about getting a cosigner. We talked about opening a secured credit card. And lastly, we talked about becoming an authorized user on an account. So thanks again. I really hope that you enjoyed today's lesson.